So what was your rank back in the Stone Age, Grandpa? Sergeant of the mess hall. The voice was sharp, slick, with an arrogance that only youth and unearned authority can produce. It sliced through the quiet hum of the administrative office, a sterile environment of gray cubicles and the faint scent of ozone from the photocopiers. Every head in the room, mostly young Marines in crisp uniforms, instinctively looked up. They saw Major Kent, his chest puffed out like a pouter pigeon, leaning against a filing cabinet with a smirk that didn't reach his cold, assessing eyes. His target was an old man standing patiently by the front desk. The old man didn't flinch. He just stood there, a picture of stillness in the bustling office. He couldn't have been younger than 80, with a full head of thick snow-white hair neatly combed. He wore a simple dark blue windbreaker, faded jeans, and work boots that had seen better decades. But it was his frame that was so jarring. While age had stooped his shoulders slightly, there was a dense corded power to his build that was undeniable. His forearms, visible below the rolled-up sleeves of his flannel shirt, were thick with the kind of muscle forged from a lifetime of hard physical work. His hands, gnarled and mapped with the fine lines of 1,000 repairs, rested calmly on the countertop. He looked less like a retired soldier and more like a retired blacksmith or a lumberjack, someone whose strength was a fundamental part of his being, not a thing to be displayed. He turned his head slowly, and his eyes met the Major's. They were a pale, clear blue, steady and deep, and they held no anger, no offense, just a quiet, unwavering observation. "It's been a while, Major," the old man said, his voice a low, growly rumble that seemed to come from deep in his chest. Major Kent chuckled, a short barking sound that grated on the nerves. "I'll bet it has. What brings you here, Pops?" "Trying to re-enlist. I think you might be a little past your prime." He gestured dismissively at the old man's jacket. "Let me guess. You found some old pin in a cereal box and thought you'd come down and tell us some more stories." The old man's gaze didn't waver. He simply gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "I'm just here to update an old identification card." "An ID card?" Kent pushed himself off the cabinet and swaggered over, circling the old man like a predator. He was a decade younger, tall, and fit in the way of a man who spent 2 hours a day in the base gym. His uniform was immaculate, his medals polished to a mirror shine. "What kind of ID you a dependent?" "A retired civilian contractor." He leaned in close, lowering his voice into a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for the entire office to hear. "Come on, tell me. I'm dying to know what rank you held that makes you think you can just wander in here." The old man finally looked away from the Major, his eyes drifting towards the large Marine Corps emblem on the wall, the eagle, globe, and anchor. He seemed to look right through it, his focus miles and years away. "My rank wasn't important," he said softly. "The job was." This seemed to infuriate Kent, the old man's calm refusal to be baited. His quiet dignity was like sandpaper on the Major's ego. "Not important," he scoffed. "Rank is everything. It's order. It's respect. It's the difference between me." He tapped the gleaming oak leaf on his collar. "And you?" He jabbed a finger towards the old man's chest. "A nobody." At the far end of the office, a young corporal named Sarah Jenkins watched, her stomach twisting into a knot. She was new to this post, but she learned quickly that Major Kent was a man who enjoyed the sound of his own voice and the weight of his own authority. She hated the way he was treating the old man. There was something about the visitor, a profound sense of peace and power held in reserve, that made the Major look like a petulant child. The old man's hands resting on the counter were perfectly still. Not a tremor, not a twitch. Sarah had seen hardened gunnery sergeants with less composure. "Sir," the old man said, his voice still even. "I don't want any trouble. I was just told this was the place to come." "Trouble?" Kent laughed again. "Old-timer. You wouldn't know trouble if it bit you on your sagging backside." Now show me this ID you're so keen on updating. Let's see what gives you the right to waste our time." With a slow, deliberate motion, the old man reached inside his windbreaker. He pulled out a worn leather wallet, the kind that folds over twice and is held together more by memory than stitching. As he fumbled with the clasp, his gnarled fingers brushed against a small metallic object pinned to the inside of his jacket. It was a simple tarnished silver star, almost invisible against the dark lining. Kent's eyes narrowed, catching the faint glint of metal. "What's that you've got there? Let me see that." He reached out, his fingers closing around the lapel of the old man's jacket. The moment the Major's hand touched the fabric, the world shifted for Samuel Hayes. The sterile scent of the office vanished, replaced by the smell of hot dust, cordite, and fear. The fluorescent hum was gone, superseded by the frantic, thumping beat of rotor blades and the distant crackle of rifle fire. The touch of the Major's hand on his jacket became the grip of a young lieutenant, his face pale with shock, blood blooming across the front of his uniform. The glint from Kent's polished rank insignia became the blinding flash of the sun off the dunes of a forgotten desert. He was back there a few decades ago, a mission that never officially happened. His team, a small unit of ghosts, was pinned down in a dried-up wadi. They were compromised, outnumbered 10-1. He was Command Sergeant Major Samuel Hayes then, but the rank was just a placeholder. He was the shepherd of this small, deadly flock. His lieutenant, a fresh-faced kid named Morrison, had taken a round to the chest. He was bleeding out, his eyes wide with the terrifying realization of his own mortality. "It's over, Sam," Morrison had gasped, his hand clutching Samuel's arm. "Leave me, get the others out." Samuel looked into the young officer's eyes around them. Chaos reigned. Dust kicked up by incoming rounds. The screams of the wounded, the relentless, oppressive heat. But in that moment, there was only the two of them. He leaned in close, his voice a raw whisper against the den. "An officer never leaves a man behind. And my men don't leave their officers. We all go home or nobody does. You understand me, Lieutenant?" He remembered the weight of Morrison's body as he'd thrown him over his shoulder. He remembered the searing pain in his own leg shrapnel had torn through it. He remembered the feeling of the hot brass from his rifle ejecting against his cheek as he laid down suppressive fire, walking backward. One man against the tide of fire, dragging his officer and his hope with him. He remembered the metallic taste of blood in his mouth and the singular cold focus. Protect your people. Get them home. The Major's shiny oak leaf was a pale imitation of the real weight of leadership he'd carried on his shoulders that day. He blinked. The desert faded. The smell of dust was replaced once more by the scent of toner. The sound of gunfire became the clicking of keyboards. He was back in the administrative office. Major Kent was still holding his jacket, a sneer on his face. "What's the matter?" "Grandpa, having a senior moment?" Kent asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Samuel slowly pulled his jacket from the Major's grasp. His hand went back to his wallet. But something had changed in his eyes. The calm sea was still there, but now there was a storm gathering in its depths. The memory hadn't made him angry. It had reminded him of who he was and of the profound difference between the man standing before him and the men he had led. Corporal Jenkins saw the change. It was subtle. A slight tightening of the old man's jaw, a hardening in his gaze that sent a shiver down her spine. This was a mistake, a colossal mistake. She knew with a certainty that defied logic that Major Kent was poking something he should have left sleeping. Her hand moved beneath her desk, her fingers finding her personal cell phone. She had the number for the base sergeant major, a man who had been kind to her, a man known for his wisdom and his intolerance for foolish officers. Her thumb hovered over the screen. It was a huge risk. Going over a major's head could end her career, but the look in that old man's eyes, It was a look that demanded respect, even if no one else could see why. She typed a quick, frantic message. Sergeant Major, urgent situation at Building 400 front office. Major Kent publicly disrespecting an elderly veteran. Something feels very wrong. Please advise. She hit send, her heart pounding in her chest. While we're all waiting, Kent prompted, crossing his arms. Let's see this mysterious ID. Samuel finally extracted a card from his wallet. It was old, laminated. The photo faded to a pale ghost. He placed it on the counter. Kent snatched it up. He squinted at it, a frown creasing his brow. This thing is ancient. Half the information is redacted. It doesn't even list a rank. Just a name. Samuel Hayes and a department. Special Projects Command. He tossed the card back on the counter contemptuously. Never heard of it. Probably some supply clerk division they shut down 50 years ago. This is useless. It was what they gave me, Samuel said, his voice flat. It's garbage, Kent declared loudly for the benefit of his audience. Just like your story. Now I'm officially ordering you to leave this facility. You are a civilian. You have no valid identification, and you are disrupting my Marines. Get out now. Samuel didn't move. He simply stood there, his blue eyes locked on the Major. He had faced down entire enemy platoon with less fear than what he now saw masquerading as authority in front of him. He had seen real leaders, men who inspired loyalty through sacrifice, not intimidation. This was just noise. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. The clicking of keyboards had stopped. Every Marine was frozen, watching the silent standoff. Kent's face was turning a blotchy red, his fury mounting at the old man's quiet defiance. Did you hear me? I gave you a direct order. It was then that the main doors to the office swung open with such force that they banged against the wall stoppers, making everyone jump. Standing in the doorway, flanked by two imposing aides, was a man who radiated an aura of absolute command. He was in his late 50s, tall and lean, his uniform adorned with the 4 stars of a full general. His name tag read Morrison. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept the room, taking in the scene in a fraction of a second. The frozen Marines, the fuming Major Kent, and the quiet old man at the counter. The entire office scrambled to their feet, snapping to the most rigid form of attention they could manage. Attention, someone barked. Major Kent spun around, his face draining of all color. He snapped a salute so sharp it looked painful. General Morrison, sir. An unexpected honor. General Morrison ignored him completely. His gaze was fixed on the old man, the hard lines of his face softened, the stern mask of command melting away to be replaced by something akin to awe, and then profound heartfelt warmth. He took a step forward, then another, his polished shoes silent on the linoleum floor. Sam, the general said, his voice husky with emotion. Sam Hayes. My God, is that really you? Samuel Hayes finally allowed a small, weary smile to touch his lips. He gave a slight nod. Hello, John. You've done well for yourself. Major Kent's jaw went slack. He looked back and forth between the 4-star commander of all United States Central Command and the old man he just called a nobody. His mind simply couldn't process it. General, sir, he stammered, trying to interject. I was just the civilian was causing a disturbance. General Morrison's head snapped towards Kent. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a glacial fury that was terrifying to behold. Major, he said, his voice low and lethally quiet. You will stand at attention. You will close your mouth and you will not speak again until I personally grant you permission. Is that clear, sir? Yes, sir. Kent squeaked, his body rigid. The general turned back to Samuel, his expression softening once more. He walked right up to the counter, and in a gesture that stunned the entire room, he reached out and clasped the old man's gnarled hand in both of his own. Sam, I haven't seen you since that dusty retirement ceremony 25 years ago. I heard you'd moved up to the mountains. What in the world are you doing here? My old ID finally expired, Samuel said with a shrug. Needed a new one to get my discount at the hardware store. A deep, booming laugh erupted from the general's chest. A hardware store discount. Of course, he shook his head in disbelief, then turned to face the silent watching Marines. His voice rose, taking on the timbre of command that could carry across a battlefield. None of you know who this man is. You see an old man in a windbreaker. You should be seeing a living monument. He paused, letting his words sink in. This is Command Sergeant Major Samuel Hayes. He was a founding member of the unit that would eventually become Delta Force. He operated in places your security clearances aren't high enough to even read the names of the term Special Projects Command on his ID. Gestured to the card on the counter was a cover for a cover. Unit so secret most of the Joint Chiefs didn't know it existed. He took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the young faces in the room. We talk about legends in the Corps. Men who held the line. Men who were the rock against which our enemies broke. Sergeant Major Hayes is not a legend. He is the man the legends are based on. He has 3 Navy Crosses, a Distinguished Service Cross, and a Silver Star he got for an action so classified. His eyes flicked to the inside of Samuel's jacket, that he was forbidden from wearing it in public for 30 years. He then turned his gaze fully on Major Kent, and the temperature in the room dropped by 20. Major, you asked him his rank. You wear your rank like a costume. This man is his rank. He embodied it. He bled for it. He turned down a battlefield commission 3 times because he refused to leave his men. He said, and I quote, "Sir, you need officers to plan the battle, but you need sergeants to win it. I know this." The general's voice cracked slightly because I was the young lieutenant whose life he saved while saying it. He pointed a trembling finger at Samuel. That man carried me bleeding and unconscious for 3 miles under constant enemy fire. He took shrapnel in his leg that day that bothers him to this very moment. He put every single one of his men and his worthless lieutenant on the chopper before he got on himself. He is the reason I am standing here today. He is the reason you have a career, Major. He is the reason this nation is safe. Major Kent was no longer just pale. He was chalk white. His eyes were wide with horror and dawning comprehension. In his hand, he had been holding a glass of water he'd picked up from his desk. His grip went slack. The glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the dead silent room. The shattering of the glass was the shattering of his world. His arrogance, his pride, his entire perception of status and worth. All of it lay in glittering shards at his feet. General Morrison's voice dropped to a cold, disciplinary whip crack. You questioned his right to be here. Major, he has more right to stand on this ground than any of us. You wear the uniform, but you have failed to learn its most important lesson, respect. Respect for those who came before you. Respect for the quiet ones, the humble ones, the ones whose deeds will never be in history books because they were too important to be written down. He stepped closer to Kent, his voice a low growl. You will pick up every piece of that glass. Then you will personally escort Command Sergeant Major Hayes to my office. You will get him a new ID card, and you will make sure it says whatever the hell he wants it to say. And then you will spend the rest of your career praying that you can earn 1/10th of the honor this man has in his little finger. Is that understood? Yes, General. Sir, Kent stammered, his voice a choked whisper. He looked at Samuel, his eyes swimming with a shame so profound it was painful to watch. Sergeant Major, sir, I am so sorry. There are no words. Samuel Hayes simply looked at the broken man before him. He saw not an arrogant major, but a young, foolish man who had just learned a hard and necessary lesson. He reached out and gently placed a hand on the general's arm. Easy, John. he said softly. The boy made a mistake. He's learning. We all had to learn once. The act of grace was more devastating to Kent than the general's fury. He visibly crumbled. The weight of the old soldier's forgiveness, a heavier burden than any punishment. As the humbled major began to clean up his mess, General Morrison put an arm around Samuel's shoulders and began to lead him away. The Marines in the office parted for them like the Red Sea, their faces a mixture of awe and shame. Corporal Jenkins, standing by her desk, simply watched them go, tears welling in her eyes. She had witnessed something more than a dressing down. She had witnessed the collision of two worlds, the world of superficial authority and the world of true earned honor. In that moment, everyone in the room understood. True strength isn't worn on a collar or shouted in a hallway. It's carried quietly in the stillness of a man's hands, in the steady calm of his eyes, and in the unspoken weight of a life lived in service to others. It's a quiet dignity that needs no announcement, for